Mukami provides the lens to see the wider picture of women in the independence struggle, the neglect and the betrayal of wives of Mau fighters in particular, and women in general in Kenya's making.
In her early age, she has this father who is conflicted. He works for white people, and he's always angry. He's always beating his children, his wives. He has bought rhino whips for his wives, both of them. Then he bought another rhino whip for Mukami, and he would beat them all the time. But he's also the one who tells them that this is what happened, that there were ordinances that were passed that changed our lives, and that there are things we cannot do. As Africans, we cannot grow coffee. There are things that we cannot do. We don't have the same rights as the white people. And he tells them, he tells his children, you've been born into servitude. Like you are servants. Like just by being born, you became servants of white people.
So the role of women in the armed struggle, rising from the late 1800s into the post-colonial period, has for the longest time been anchored on the discussions about the women's deaths in narratives. It is about the untold story, and here is the first of a kind, a narration transcribed from Mukami Kimathi's Karugano, as written by Werimu Nderitu. I choose to view this book, Mukami Kimathi, as the most deserving homage to the great women of Kenya, and not just as a focal point to start telling the tales about great women after whimsical debates about the role of women in liberation.
We see Mukami's rebellious streak beginning to come up because she decides she's going to go to school without her father's permission, yet her father really used to beat her.
Getting the bad treatment from these people, the colonialists, actually made our men or our fathers back then very violent, and it was normal. It was normal for women to be abused without them talking.
When she's in school, she has a teacher, and his name is Dedan Kimathi. Kimathi's father died in the First World War, and they've come back, and then the Kipandi is reintroduced again, but this time there's a specific Kipandi for the Kikuyu, Meru, and Embu, who are seen to be agitating more, and Kimathi now, they've moved, they are living in Olkalao, and Olkalao is where part of this, the Happy Valley, you know the stories of the Happy Valley, so they could see all these, like the colonialists, the kind of life they were living, the settlers. They were living a life of, they used to swap husbands and wives and drink every day, and they had party after party after party. And then these guys, and then the Kimathis and others are working for them. So anyway, so he began getting people around. She says her dining table became the place where people would come to learn political lessons.
Mukami has the right upbringing in terms of information. Mukami is brought up with information that she needed to hear. Even if her father later becomes a home guard, she hears what the father has to say, and she picks that energy in a way that she chooses to fight for what is right. She does not become bitter and become complacent. She goes the right way, and this is why we talk about her today.
Chief Orohi was killed in Kiambu, and there was this governor called Evelyn Baring who came, and he said, I'm the one who will sort out these people once and for all, these Mau Mau. And when they were killed, at that time, Kimathi was not the one who actually first led people into the forest. It was Madenge, the one who Mukami has talked about, that they were jailed with the wife of Madenge Wamirugi. She fought in the forest. She had her own troop that she led. And all these are details she refused to give me. I had to get them from other people because she says, I took the oath. And she says, when you take the oath, unless you are not a real Mau Mau, really you cannot tell what it was.
Whatever she was looking for from Mukami, she cannot easily get it. How much of oaths do we take in our movement? Or do we just have slogans, and I don't know. I think it's an admirable thing that there was a pact that binded all these people, and that there is a mystery, the Mau Mau War, what it was, how it looked like, that we can't unfurl today. We can't tell specifically. This was the formula. It's not Pythagoras' theorem.
When she leaves the forest, her husband gives her a bodyguard and tells her, go to Nairobi and recruit. it's a life of hide and seek because she doesn't have a kipande. Because to get a kipande, you need to be registered as who is your husband, where do you come from. Those were details she could not give. So she was arrested. Her first arrest actually was right out here, near Central Police Station, a place called Kingston. Kingston. Yes. So that was her first arrest. She was arrested there. Even inside the prison, she's recruiting. And what is she using? The language she had her husband use in their house at the dining table. The things she used to say to people, that is the language she uses to recruit. She finds herself very good in passing the same arguments her husband used to pass, that this is the reason we must resist. This is the reason we must fight. We may look like we don't have guns, we are not, and they are strong, but we must fight them. She was taken to prison. She lied. She gave a false name. And then she was taken to court. And then she said she comes from Kiambu. And then, of course, what they used to do, because they were so organized, they would have, of course, asked the chief in Kiambu whether this woman with this name comes from your village. And the chief would have said no. So she decided to escape from prison, which she did. Very dramatic. You have to read how she did that and how she actually led, not just her. She escaped with everybody who wanted to escape in the prison. She took off with them.
When Mukami left the forest to go and take care of her child, and she used to run with that child, what I remember from the book, she used to run with that child just practically anywhere. You have a baby on your back and you're running, and at this point she goes into one of the rivers in Nairobi, and she has to stay under and then come out, and comes out and finds that the guards are gone. I don't know, she was very militant and very intelligent. And besides that, besides being a mobilizer, she was a good version of a movement's NIS. I mean, informer. She walks, I don't know, it's just amazing.
She gets arrested again, and this time she's not so lucky because she's betrayed by somebody from her village. So she used to describe the way they would beat her, and I would be sitting there, and I would be, because it was, her descriptions were so thorough, like in terms of what they did to her, and the rapes and everything.
Mukami is explaining situations where women were raped and a lot of things happened to women, and it was normalized that if your husband was not in a cell, then he was somewhere, I don't know, and that I believe is what the fourth liberators, people in the fourth liberation war are actually trying to make sense of. Everything ugly that our women, our grandmothers, Makina Mukami Kimathi, experienced the first war is what I think we are actually struggling to bring to light and fight and make it, give it an identity. So my second run through this book throws me into Mukami's nostalgic scenes of her childhood days. The beauty of this is the opening and welcoming into the African style of writing, which elicits the feel that you sat down and started listening to an orally told story. It elicits anxiousness in a good way, and we were caught up in the moment as she was trying to bring the book to us. So it goes deeper to paint a picture of a society that was not flawed till the launch of the ordinances and past laws, which locked Kenyans into agitation, desire for change, the zeal to fight, and the mourning after their loved ones. It was taunting that a white visitor will just show up and in a decade's time introduce civilization whose unfortunate benefit loss or something to the people was land, freedom, blood, social structures. The so good-willed ministers of Christianity will later pave way for imperialists. So her intelligence is such that it is natural. Her intelligence is such that it leaks great quotes with no strain. This book is the best gift a Raymond Derrida has given to the young people of Kenya. Mukami's tale is one of her life's wishes fulfilled and lived on page 281 of the book. She says, "I want my story to be told and written to, so that when I leave this earth, young girls will be inspired to stand up for justice and for what is right. Her wish is fulfilled. You don't read this book and feel incapable of doing something for change." However, somehow it leaves you very broken midway. So However, a few currencies in the book need to be reconciled. These are my independent thoughts. So my soft nails, not close to hardening, to warrior Mukami's nails, now old and frail, pounced on this book, and the first thought that hit me was how much of the art of war for liberation I was going to mine from this book. I really was expectant when I started reading the book. The few illustrations leave me in awe, but the dust for information on how the Kenya Land and Freedom Army organized are hard to mine.
Like in Kimathi, they kept her in that they had built a cell where she could only stand. Like it was so small, she couldn't move, she could only stand. And I found that a bit, I wondered what kind of a cell is that, until I went to Auschwitz. I went to Auschwitz, and in Poland, and they have the exact same cell. And then if you read Britain's Gulag, the Imperial Reckoning, then you see the descriptions of almost the exact same methods of what happened in Auschwitz to what happened here, and it's incredible. They had a place where they kept the women who they considered very, very bad women. So herself and the wife of Mirugi, and then the other wife and Mamangina, who they shared a cell with. So they are there, and then Mamangina leaves.
There's another one by Major M. Garucci. The women were the mothers and the spirit of the revolution. We could not have survived in the forest without their overwhelming support, moral encouragement, and revolutionary love. Together, we have written a glorious chapter in the history of our country.
When then Kimathi is arrested, and then he requests to see his wife before his hand, and she's taken to him. He was telling her, be strong, Then he said, go and tell the children that have gone on a journey. Don't tell them that I've been killed. And go and tell, and then he told her that a flag is coming. So that was in 1957 when they killed him. And so he was hanged, and then she was released, and then she went home. Mukami kept telling me, go and do the research of what happened to Kenya between 1957 and 1963. She says that is when Kenya was divided. That is when Home Guards consolidated themselves. Between 1957 and 1963, that is when the country went. And she says, people don't talk about it because at that time, like for us, Mau Mau, it was a struggle. So she became a laborer. She used to farm until she's discovered, until people know who she is, then they throw her out. And she says she kept going further and further away. And she was living with her children in a cave. And she showed me the cave. And why did she live with them in a cave? Because those were Mau Mau caves. So you find in Mukami's story how often she goes back to what they did as Mau Mau. That when she had to find somewhere to live, she went and lived in this cave.
Most of us women actually shy away from political seats, but she tries to do her best, given that a lot happened, like she mentioned, between 1957 to 1963, where the Home Guards had what was their home, and the fighters are out there, and she's struggling to pay a loan. She's farming. Her children are not well educated. They go to farming with her. There's this point where her children are taken, and it's a whole 30 years of the aftermath of being a liberator, the anchor to one of the world's greatest men, Dedan Kimathi.
Then independence is coming. And then people like Achieng Oneko have been released from prison, and then they come looking for her, and JM Karaoke. They look for her, and they are telling her, and she says, and this is one of the things she debunks, because she says people keep going on and on, that this Mau Mau was a Kikuyu movement. And she says, this Mau Mau was a Kikuyu movement is a narrative of the Home Guards. They are able to, they stole our story, they made it their story. They said Mau Mau was a Kikuyu movement and that nobody else was there. And she said, Achieng Oneko took the oath. He was Mau Mau. And when Achieng Oneko died, Mukami went for his funeral, and she went with a big group of people, the Mau Mau, and she said they sang the Achieng Oneko song. There's actually an Achieng Oneko Mau Mau song. They told her, Kadu is supported by the settlers. Kadu is supported by the settlers, and the settlers actually, one of the things that the settlers had asked for, was fighting for, was Majimbo. And why? Because they wanted the white, these white highlands, they wanted it to be their own settlement where they would live, they would continue with life, and then the rest of Kenya can move on as it wants to. So she got out and she mobilized and she went to the forest again, looking for Mau Mau who are still in the forest. She spoke to them. She said, you have to join KANU, you have to. And then she says that the election was very violent. We think violent elections just began. Even then it was violent. There's a photo of her here when now Achieng Oneko and J.M. Kariuki took her to Kenyatta, Jomo Kenyatta. And after she finished mobilizing, and KANU had won. So then after that, again she was there. After all that was done, so she didn't know now what to do with herself. She went back to her cave again with her children. And then it was J.M. Kariuki who came looking for her and told her, there is land distribution program happening. And she resisted. She said, I don't want to be distributed to land. I want to go back to the Kimathi land. Because what had happened was that the land that belonged to the Mau Mau was demarcated and given to home guards.
She outrightly and prophetically mentions that on page 276 of the book, that the war ahead is about fighting ethnicism. Look at the years between 1957, like she talked about it, to 1963. That is when everything happened. That before then, there was laws passed that certain communities could only be found in Eastlands, other communities could only be found in Westlands, and other communities could only be found in other specific areas. In the process, there is a battle of people like the Maasai who have been disinherited in Kenya. Greatly disinherited. Look at the 2007-2008 post-election violence. Look at the violence that happened before I was born in 1993. I don't know what year exactly that violence happened. The clashes in Rift Valley. Look at what message they used to incite the masses to rise against each other. Look at what that traces back to. It traces back to plantations, to people that were moved from this place to that place. Like Mukami herself, she can't get back her land.
Till today, the Kimathi land is owned by home guards. So it's so incredible. Like some of these stories, you can't even believe that till today that is what has happened. So anyway, so then she comes out and she goes, and then J.M. Kariuki tells her, no, you have to take this land. So she signs on. And so that's the house you have seen in the strength of a woman. She signs on, and then she's given a loan. So she buys this land. Then she has to pay. She has to farm and pay. So she used to farm and pay, but it got to a point where she couldn't anymore. And she used to be extremely desperate.
So this lady is paying a loan for a land she lives in. The irony, she was fighting for land, and she pays for that land for 30 years. She cannot school her children because she is a widow. People just pay visits to her. Some may not, give her the needs she needs beyond that day. Yeah. Then she goes through there's a place she explains when she first broke down for the first time. She was ever very strong-willed while they were in the forest, when she was roaming in Nairobi, through Kiambu. She was all over. And there's a place after independence where she breaks down for the first time. And you can see someone who is suffering, someone who is going through a lot, and is going through a lot of it alone. Yeah, she has no such kind of support. Her mother-in-law, one of the people that she adored, lost it, and she dies. Then her mother as well dies. And then the father is this person she later comes and reconciles with later in life. it's so. And now there is Mama Ngina in this book, and Mama Ngina Kenyatta is the mother of Uhuru Kenyatta. We all know that, and is the wife of Jomo Kenyatta. I'm echoing you. Between 1957, when Kimathi was executed, all the way to 1963, there is the culturally awakening, there is the music, people are writing. There was Kamaru writing, Mbio Koinange, Kimbia, ende utulete nini, Uhuru. There's that state of confusion. People don't know who they are. Do they continue living in the forests, or do they join, this side for favors? I said it somewhere that Kenyatta, Jomo Kenyatta, Kamau Ngengi, was a person who was only there at the right place at a time where there were opportunities. He ends up becoming the opportunist. And this lady, Mama Ngina, was taking care of one of Mukami Kimathi's children in prison. She has seen everything they have gone through, but the betrayal is there. It's from her husband. She could have done more.
By the time when she was leaving prison, she was only 26, yet so many things had happened to her. So then she went through this whole phase where then she became a Christian. She founded her own church, which, of course, not ironically, is called Heroes Church. So then she's in this church, and she became completely like in the church. So that's the period I was talking about when I would speak to her and she'd tell me, let's read the Bible together. Let's find answers in the Bible. And the Old Testament, and we would be reading, and I couldn't get through to her at all for a long, long time. So then, and actually at that particular point, I kind of gave up, although my family didn't. My family would push me to write her story. I kind of gave up on her. It was at that time when human rights activists here in Nairobi started seeing that there was a parallel between the way they were being treated by the government and the way the freedom fighters were treated by the government. Beatrice Kamau, who is here, she's sitting at the back there. And then there was Kangeda Mungai, who is not here. And then there was Kamis Ramadan, who is here, taking the video. They are the ones who went to find Mukami. They found her in her farm, and they told her, we have come for you. You are the wife of a hero. You are a hero in yourself. We have to take you. People have to know you. The world has to know you. I began working for the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, and we had an award ceremony here, right here at the Norfolk, which of course we chose deliberately, because at the Norfolk, this is where settlers used to sit and shoot Africans for sports. Like if you were just passing, they would shoot you the way you shoot an antelope. So anyway, so we had the award there, and then we gave an award to Dedan Kimathi, and Mukami received it on his behalf. And it was at that moment when all these years she had been sitting there quiet, when she took the microphone, and at that time, so many things had happened. Mwai Kibaki was now president. He had lifted the ban on the Mau Mau as a terrorist organization. You can imagine they were a terrorist organization until 2013. And then she said, I'm demanding for my husband's body.
What is this, again, beautiful story about sharing time with prominent women, with the women she was with in prison, and besides everything she has gone through, still there's a chapter that can be dedicated to Mama Ngina Kenyatta, and there's a chapter that is actually later dedicated to Uhuru Kenyatta. That thing was disturbing me. If we are to forgive and forget, and in Mukami Kimathi's words, we are supposed to live harmoniously, then she's been portrayed as one who suffers Stockholm syndrome for her disinheritors. Kenya's enemy within, the enemy with the same color, and from our clans and backyards is a person who is bleeding Kenya dry.
You've called it Stockholm syndrome. I don't even know what it is. But you see her, because I knew her in the depths of her poverty. And then Beatrice and Kamisi, they find her, and then they put her out there, and then she even begins to be articulate about the issues. She even gathers the courage to talk about Mau Mau, something. She says the word Mau Mau hadn't left her mouth for decades. Now she's talking about it openly. And then, so what I feel happened to her was that when the Moi Kibaki lifted the proscription on Mau Mau as a terrorist organization, that her relief at being recognized was so strong.
Her being taken to church was intentional. Why did it happen just like almost immediately or after, if I got the details right, when you started to do the story? I don't know. Maybe you can correct me, but I feel it was deliberate, so that she can be pacified and talk about the Bible and stuff like that. And the way the Bible portrays and, tells women how to act and do stuff is very problematic.
When Mukami got into religion, it wasn't as pacification. In fact, she had rented out a corner of her land to a church, and she was always at loggerheads with them. She didn't like their drums, she didn't like so many things, but she needed the money because she was very broke then. And one of the people from the church is the one who began speaking to her. And how he got to her is he was able to explain the Old Testament in such a way that she saw the old way of life, like during the colonialism, her life when she was young, this life of sacrifices of lambs and all that. She related in that sense. So for religion became a refuge for her. It wasn't so much to pacify her, but it was at that stage where I'm saying she had all the symptoms. When she described them, what she was feeling, you could see she had a post-traumatic stress disorder.
We are thrown into a context in the book of Mukami Kimathi while growing up, and we discover that she's very curious. So her first encounter with religion was not actually when she was older. It was when she was a bit younger, in late 30s.
With Christianity.
Yes, with Christianity, sorry. Yeah, with Christianity. So she describes on how amusing she found the Presbyterian, PCA church, and all those things. But eventually, when Kimathi finally goes to the forest with his code, you bring out an aspect of culture, an aspect of religion, in a way that she ends up describing Kimathi as a person he had a very special relationship with God. And I think that is, again, amusing to read at that point. She says he had a very interesting relationship with God, that he could speak to animals, he could emulate animal sounds, he could do all those things. And then now we find, after so many years, there's social structures. There is a Mukami that is going through PTSD, and you feel it actually when you're reading the book on the chapters where she doesn't want to be associated with Christianity, and then eventually this young man of the Konyihia Hawaii's, the crashing at her kitchen, eventually wins her, and she joins the church. And when she was refusing to talk to Akina Beatrice, it's interesting that eventually we are brought into seeing what a fight can do.
What is also missing is in history, not in your book, about what were Mau Mau fighting for. They had their oaths, they had their own libraries, they had their own collection of books and so on. The British destroyed a lot of it. I think what needs to come out is men and women both, but what were they fighting for? Land was obviously a thing, but within that, what ideology was there? What long-term thing that they were fighting for from her perspective, from their perspective?
I had visited her at the height of the 2017 election, and they were surrounded by all these political paraphernalia for a certain party that I think most members of this party had neglected the Kimathi family over the years, so it was very surprising to see that. But when she mentioned that when you reach a certain age and there are all these people fawning over you, taking care of you, now it all makes sense why they would align themselves with this type of people, despite the fact that over the years they had rejected them.
Uh, Having passed through the story or the book, I have come to realize about what they fought for, that what we should continue fighting for up to now. And it is sadly enough that we are afraid of fighting for the thing, for the ethnicity and the rest. It is very, very unfortunate the youth have neglected that opportunity of fighting for their nation, having the patriotism.
I think you should go and look for the books of Shiraz Durrani, all of them, all of them. They'll give you, as I was saying earlier, I hadn't read anywhere the rules that govern the Mau Mau in the forest until I read him. Like, just read all of them. You'll have a knowledge of Mau Mau that you don't even, will just blow your mind. And then there's this man called Ronnie Casrills. He's a South African, white South African, but he was with Mandela. He was one of those who was with Mandela when they were fighting in Mkonto wa Sizwe. He wrote a book called My Moment with a Legend. And in that book, he explains how Mandela used to speak to them about Dead and Kimathi and what Dead and Kimathi did and how then they can emulate Dead and Kimathi. So it's just another good book. And then another very good read for understanding Mau Mau and, and that whole history of what was happening there is Not Yet Uhuru by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. It's a really good book. You read it and you totally understand how things happen. And then Firoz Noroji wrote many books, but there's one he wrote called A Kenyan Journey. And there is a description he's written there that makes you understand how the system worked, the legal system worked during the colonial days. And he's talking about the Mau Mau being tried in a prison or in a courtroom, and the windows are open, and as they are being tried, remember this is a trial where you can be found either guilty or not guilty, but as they are being tried, somebody is building a gallows to hang them right there, and they can see it. So you are in court, it's supposed to be like a court process, and you can see the gallows being built. So to understand the lawyers, all these lawyers who represented the Mau Mau and what they did and all those kind of things, Firoz Noroji is a good read. And then Mackenzie, Kenya's trade unions, the crucial years, also good to understand that whole concept of how all this came together, trade unions and Mau Mau and all those kind of things. And then, of course, this Britain's Gulag is a really good book. And there's a revised one of the British Gulag. There's a revised version. I don't remember what its new title is, but it's the same author, Caroline Elkins. So, and then, of course, Maina Wakinyati's History of Resistance. Now, that's the kind of book that should be in the curriculum, but it isn't. But History of Resistance is very, very thorough, because he talks about what ethnic communities in Kenya across the country, what did they do to resist colonialism, and then he builds it up to the Mau Mau and other things that happened.
I'd like to challenge you and also, other future authors, and other future activists and, activists that we're having right here now to also write on how, like this is a debate. I don't know when this debate started of, women are superior than men, or men are superior than women, or men are up, women are down, I really don't understand when this debate, started, and I don't think it will ever end, For me, it's like to challenge you to also write on how, women and men complemented each other in the struggle, because women cannot be there without men, and men cannot exist without women.
The resilience in Mukami is a representation of what women actually did. There were so many people. You can see women are said that they can multitask. And the men went to the forest. We interviewed other women who said they were from Molo, and they said that when they were being taken to when the people were being taken to the reserves, men ran away. So those ones who landed in forest was not just because they were courageous and they wanted to go and fight. Some were running away. But women remained behind. They are the ones who even struggled. They fought their wars. Women were the ones who were fighting without weapons. They would be the ones carrying weapons, but they would be the ones to take secrets. They would be the ones to be jailed like Mukami. So what we are saying is that, as Alice has put it, is that Mukami went through many generations, from colonial time up to the other president, the current president. I personally, when I went to see Mukami, I think I was about 30 or my early 30s. And remember, I had been brought up by, at such a time that you would not mention the name of Moi without checking who is next to you. And then before then, there was the songs that we used to sing to Kenyatta, that Simba, sijui, anyitire shiba akiwa Nyamutito. Kenyatta held the Simba and showed it to the forest. So we thought that Kenyatta is the one who had fought. Now to hear that there is a guy called Kimathi.
It's very refreshing to hear the story of the Mau Mau from a woman's perspective, because the little that I know from the Mau Mau history that we read from our history textbooks actually tell it from a man's perspective. So I'm very impressed to hear that a voice of a woman telling the story of her experience in the Mau Mau movement can be told by another woman.
My parents were not told about, actually my mom is very against me being an activist 100%, because they had this fear that was put in them. If you talk against the government or you try to against what is expected of you, it's just death. So I think how some of us are raised, or most of us are raised, we are not raised by parents who are aware of, like, they were only told their role, like in history books, we are told the women, their role was just to bring food. That's all I can remember from the history book. Like, their role was just to bring food, and that's something our parents have been put on, and that's what they put onto our generation now. So yeah, so I think our curriculum and how we are being raised is another thing that may feel like we don't have, and things that are happening to our current generations. Not so many women are wanting to get interest and seeing what they can do as a woman to fight for change in this current situation. So we need to speak to young people as well, both male and female.
Quite a number of years I've been working in Nigeria, and they got to a point where they don't teach history anymore in their schools. And it's because it makes people feel as if they are conflicted, and yet if you don't teach it, you will repeat it. As we've seen here, like, it's not taught, it will be repeated. If it has been taught properly, and if you look at how, for example, the Holocaust is recorded and taught, it's with that whole idea of, if it's not taught, it will be repeated. And then in the book, Mukami talks about what they were fighting for. And she says it was summarized in 2 words. In Kikuyu, it's Idhakana Weyadi, the land and freedom. And she said land and freedom. And she said, and it's the only thing she told me about the oath, was that the oath was about protecting land and freedom.
We should know at what point patriarchy was really entrenched in African being, because we come from matriarchal societies as Africans, and as the author pointed out, that it was so strict
that no man in the forest could try to abuse a woman. You couldn't rape her, you couldn't beat her. That's proof that those people who are fresh from African reality, they hadn't gone to university, those fighters. They hadn't gone to school. Like us here now, you start slapping your woman after you leave university. It means that, that's evidence that the African school, before the coming of the European, was deeply rooted in discipline and morals in that you couldn't abuse women. So we need to know at which point we turned, we became monsters on our own mothers.
The way it's portrayed now, people talk about the oath as if it's a Kikuyu thing. Yet the oath was a Mau Mau thing, and the Mau Mau was not Kikuyu. She gave me some names there in the book of people they were fighting within the forest, some Mau Maus who are Kamba, who are Masai, and then of course the example she gave of Achieng Oneko. Just listening to you, talking about the fourth liberation and talking about and thinking how often history repeats itself, that here we are again, and the conversation is the same, and the issues, as you said, the basic issues, right to food, right to water, right to basics. Still, again, we are still on the same place. And then the ethnicism, she was also very, very strong on that, saying, "Hii ukabila, like it's killing this country."
Since the story is full of those graphic moments, very dehumanizing narrations from her, then granted Mukami Kimathi's experience, you know, and how she narrated, did it at any one point affect you, I mean your well-being? Did it have a toll on you somehow? Because you channel that a lot in the book through her story. So here is a Mukami that is broken. Then after she's broken, she now finds the church, a social structure that, you know, brings her. At least one of the things that people are assured of in churches is that you'll have people that will bury you. She has been neglected. All these things are happening. What are your comments? Did it make you, I mean, did it change you?
Her story is the history of Kenya. It's the history of betrayals. It's the history of, you know, just somebody. Because if you look at her and you look at Kimathi, they were just people who, they were not rich, they had no means, but them and others just decided, now we have to stand up for something. We have to take a stand on something that we believe in, and then they took that stand and they really suffered for it. And at some point, as I was saying earlier, she would talk and we would just keep quiet and look at each other. And I wouldn't cry because she wouldn't cry either. She's not the crying type. We would just sit there and just think about it. And she would tell me, yeah, this is how my life is. She often said, I've never lived through anything easy in my life. Everything has been difficult, everything. So it changed me a lot. I think I appreciated the second liberators more. I appreciated them, but I appreciated them even more. Like, you know, Beatrice, you know, in those days, she used to be called Mama Wanguvu. And it used to be that a demo is not complete unless Beatrice is in that demo. Yeah, so people would be like, was Beatrice there? So it wasn't. But if she's there, then people know things are serious, yeah? Like, people like Beatrice, they really suffered, you know, like, her life, as I was saying earlier, it's been a very, very tough life. So it's very difficult for anyone. People read it and they get changed, so you can imagine writing it. It was very, very, very difficult to write it. And especially when I was trying to explain to her that what you were going through, you had post-traumatic stress disorder, and this is how it pans out, and this is how it looks like. And she was saying, no, I'm strong. Are you saying that I'm not strong? And I was saying, yeah, you're strong, but in some sense you can be weak. So anyway, it was a very, very, out of what the books I've written, this is the one. I feel in my heart, and I feel it all the time, and I know it inside out.